Professor Dr. Jolly.
Hi. I want to talk about playing musically. I mean, we all hear that all the time, right? And you'll hear somebody play and you go, well, they played all the notes, but wasn't much music. And so I want to talk about what that is and how we go back to getting it, you know, in our performance. And I'm old, so I have to have notes, or I forget who I am, where I am. It says, hear Tucker Jolly over and over again, just so I remember. I developed this in my teaching was a way to learn a piece. I'm not talking about sight reading here. I'm talking about when you've got a piece and a solo, let's say, that you're going to do. And the first thing I want you to do, I have 3 steps that I want you to take. The first step is to sing it. Not only the rhythm, don't that pitch yet. Just sing the contour of the line. If it goes higher, sing higher. If it goes lower, sing lower. Sing the right rhythm. Sing the correct articulations. It's a dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da. And you sing dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da, not ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. You know, don't do that. Sing the articulation. And use the articulation that you use on the horn. No ba-ba-ba. We don't go ba. You know, we go ta, to. So to-ho-to-to-to-to-to-to, like that. So use the articulation you're going to use when you're singing. Sing the dynamics that you want. If they're written out, that's easy. If they're not, then you might have to think a little bit. But you want to sing the dynamics that you want. You want to sing the phrasing that you want. It's easy to sing a lot longer than you can play, but know about where you're going to need to breathe and breathe there when you're singing. And sing the musical feel that you want. Now, I'm not talking, don't do an entire piece. Do a phrase. So you sing until you get that. Don't just go through motions. That's not going to help you. You want to sing that phrase until it's where you want it. Because what that does is set up the idea about what you're going to play. There's your musical idea right there in the singing. And you've got it. So if you get that phrase to sound like a musical phrase, it really says something you wanted to say, then that's where you want to be before you go on to step 2. Okay? Now, we got a couple of trombone players in here? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk to them in terms of vowels, but you can just realize that you can do the same thing with the slide. Okay? The second thing to do then, once you've got this musical concept of how you want that phrase to go, then you want to work out the fingers. That's the next step. And go slowly if it's really complicated, so you don't learn wrong fingers. How many of you ever learned the wrong finger and had to unlearn it? If you don't raise your hand, you're lying. Okay? Avoid that. You know, go slowly, learn them really, really well. Just do them, don't blow the horn or anything, just finger. So your concentration is only on the fingers. Once you get the fingers to where you've got it and you can do it in time. First you start out with time, you get to where you can do it in the phrase the way you want to play it. Then do it with fingers and wind only. And what you want to do then is make the wind and the fingers make that phrase sound. If I'm doing Amazing Grace on it, I want to play it like that, so that the wind makes the music. Because ultimately, guess what? That's what's going to happen anyway. That's what's going to happen anyway. So you want to get it set up like that, so that the wind and the fingers are all set. And the reason for the working on the fingers so much is, if you don't know a finger, what happens to the rhythm? Somebody. Is it going to be good? No. Yeah. If you don't know what button to push down, you hesitate. And he who hesitates in music is lost. Okay? And so you want to get those fingers so that they're fluid and you're not hesitating. And again, the important thing about this process is, and it's so easy to want to, we didn't start playing these instruments to sing rhythm and pitches and to do fingers and all that sort of stuff. We wanted to play the darn thing, right? So it's really hard to have the discipline to get these steps with integrity, but the more you do it with integrity, the better the results will be. Okay? Step 3. What do you think that might be?
Play it. Play it. Actually play it?
Nope.
Oh.
Not yet.
Singing for you.
Singing, the pitches. Yeah. You got to know the tune, yeah? And this is where you need to develop enough piano skills so you can go to the piano and knock out the tune. You want to get to where you can really sing it pretty well. Now, there's some things. If you're doing the Penderecki, it's a little hard to sing that. You know, it's like all over the place and everything. But still go to the piano and do it as close as you can do it. And get to where you can sing it first out of time and then sing it in time. And if it's something like a Rochou, you know what a Rochou is, a Bordoni, if it's something like a vocalise that's really easy, you should be able to sing it really, really well. So then you've applied pitch to your steps that you got. And then I want you to go, now you can buzz it on the mouthpiece. I like using about an 8-inch tube on the mouthpiece. And the reason I like doing that is that it creates a resistance that the instrument has. Most of your resistance in your instrument is created in that first lead pipe, because then it gets expansive. And so you can get a real good feel. What I encourage students to do is start off with about 10 inches and blow in it and see if it feels like the middle register of your horn. And if it does, then stay with that. If 9 inches or what, just keep whacking off a little bit until it feels like you're blowing. You want it to feel as close to the middle register of your horn. The other thing you need to do then is go about 1.5 inches out and make a hole, like a clarinet hole. And the reason for that is once you reach the point to where the wavelength is inside the pipe, if you don't understand what that means, don't worry about it, it doesn't matter. It'll get to where you can't play up there, okay? And so if you have that hole, on tuba it happens up around high B flat, high C. On euphonium, somewhere around C or D. But if you have that hole and you let up the hole, then you'll have about the same resistance as you're up the register. The higher you go, the more you're creating resistance with your lips. That's the reason that I like the pipe, because I don't want you to create resistance with your lips in order to get a buzz on the mouthpiece. And also I find that with the pipe, you can buzz essentially the same phrase you're going to play. With the mouthpiece, that's very difficult. You've already found that out. If you buzz just the mouthpiece, it's really loud. And you're blowing a lot of wind, and you can only play so much with it. And then you have to control it, and that's hard. Very advanced players do it very well, but the tube I find is really helpful. And if you do any teaching, it's really helpful with younger students. I had a junior high kid last week come in for a lesson, and I was able to get him to buzz pitches on the pipe, and there was no way he was going to do that on the mouthpiece. So it can be very helpful. Anyway, you play it on the pipe. When you play it on the pipe, you want to be able to make it sound like the tune you want to play. Rhythm, articulation, dynamics, music, everything sounds on that piece of pipe. You want to make that your instrument. I once was talking about simple instruments. I played a group in Pittsburgh called the American Wind Orchestra years and years ago. By that I mean 1966, 67. When I played it in 1967, there was another tuba player in the group, and we had a composer named David Amram. And Amram had a Japanese flute whistle. And he had us play an open fifth, G and a D, for like 15 minutes while he played Japanese flute. And when he finished, he said, "Parents, don't go out and buy a $1,000 instrument for your kids. Buy this 10-cent Japanese flute and find out if you got any musical talent." And so you can find out if you got musical talent with the pipe. The other nice thing about the pipe is once you get it, it's portable. Our instruments are not so portable, are they? And so you can get a lot done with just that pipe and get it. So you get it to where you can buzz it on the pipe and make it sound like the tune. You know, it's there. It's all there. Now, what do?
Play it.
Ah! Good man. Now you play it. strong parts about this whole thing is that if you do these steps with integrity, once you play it, you're going to know, one, did I miss a pitch? Because you know what the tune is. Did I miss a finger? You know what the right finger is. Did I miss a rhythm? So you know if you're wrong, and you're not going to learn something wrong. Learning it wrong is hard, because then you have, instead of one step, which is to learn it, you've got to go through two steps. Unlearn it, and then learn it. And also I find that our brains are really weird. You learn it wrong, it can be hell to unlearn it. It really can. It can be very difficult. And push come to shove, you'll do what you learned that very first time through. So that's my advice to you as to how to learn a piece, okay? Now, let's talk about musical performance. When you're playing things, what are some of the things that make a musical performance? Somebody?
Dynamics.
Dynamics is a biggie, isn't it? Yeah. And I like to think of dynamics in sort of two tiers, okay? They're the big dynamics. You know, this is forte, and this is piano, and this is mezzo forte. But then what really makes the difference is those shading dynamics that make the line. You hear somebody, well, make it go to that note. Well, what do I do to make it go to that note? Well, dynamics is one way to make it go to that note. If I want to go ta-ta-ta-ti, that has direction. Or ta-ta-ta-ti, still has direction. Just complete reverse. Okay? So dynamics. In our studio class at the University of Akron, these guys have some fond memories of that. The way I did studio class was when you were ready to play something in class, you would play it. Everybody in the class had to write a written critique and hand them to me. The students did not know who wrote the critique. I wouldn't tell them who. I just read the critiques to them. I knew who wrote it, but they didn't. We also taped it. We recorded it. So after you played in class, you come into your lesson, we would read the critique, and then I would read my critique, and they had to write a critique, and then we'd talk about it, and then we'd listen to the recording to see how much of the critique was really valid. Sometimes things weren't really. Some people were half asleep, and they heard one thing that went by for 30 seconds and wrote a thing on it. But most of the time, they were pretty good. What do you think the number one criticism was of most of the players in that? Number one.
Dynamics.
You got it. Dynamics. Almost every time. You could have done more with the dynamics. And I would tell them before they went into play. You want to take that criticism away. The problem with dynamics is that when we are in our minds thinking we're crescendo, or we think we're playing piano, or we're doing it, it reinforces it. So we think we're doing it gangbusters. And if you actually listen to the tape, you go, oh, I didn't make half the crescendo I thought I was making, because our minds reinforce that. And when your mind is reinforcing it, it's really difficult. It's the reason with cell phones these days, it's really easy to take yourself, isn't it? I mean, you don't have to get equipment, you don't have to go to a studio, you can do it. And you don't have to have a wonderful recording to do that. It doesn't matter. Just something that tells you, because I can point out a student's making a rhythmic mistake, and they'll sometimes look at me like, I'm not. And I'll say, okay, take yourself and let's listen. Oh. So it's very revealing, and it's one of your best teachers. So, you spend $1,000 on those things. I don't have one, so use it. But anyway, it's a really great thing to do. And that'll tell you, are my dynamics effective? Am I really doing what I think I'm doing? One thing just back about learning a piece. There's two things that we have when we're learning a piece. One is, do I have the skills to play this piece? I.e., let's say you said, I want to play Carnival Dance, but you can't double a triple tone. You're going to have a tough time. Okay? You're going to have a tough time. So I'm just using that as a big, broad example. But, look at the piece. And What we want, ideally, as teachers, is to have pieces that our students are capable of playing, but that challenge them. And that's a fine line to find sometimes. It really is. And so you want to pick pieces that push you, but that you know you can reach. But on the flip side of that, you want to work on your skills. You should have a warm-up skill routine you do every day to get better. Improve your range, improve your tongue, improve your fingers. You know, all of you have been preached that to learn your scales, right? Anybody not been told to learn scales? Yeah. Why? Why?
Do scales make up music?
Well, scales make up the music. That's only one part of it. What else? Why do we want you to learn scales? Well, you guys are full. Come on. Yeah.
Improves your sight reading.
It'll improve your sight reading. Why? Ooh. Yeah.
You'll be able to recognize scale patterns in the music.
You'll recognize scale patterns in the music. That's true. There's some other reasons. Keep thinking. Look, if you have to learn music, learning a scale pattern is learning how to learn a pattern. You understand what I'm getting at? So if you have to learn how to learn patterns, then when you go to learn another pattern, how many times do you see a tonic to tonic scale in music? Not often. But if you know the scales and you go in the organ book and you play then you've played it from tonic, you've played all the modes of it. So that really helps. So you want to learn how to learn patterns. And by knowing patterns, it helps you recognize other patterns. So it's really important. And that's what I mean by building your skill. You want to have your skill so that, you know, ideally it would be that put anything in front of me, I can play it. You know, it might take me some time, but I've got the skill to do that. Okay? That's your ultimate goal. And so you want to find things that do. Now I don't want to get into all the things that we can do about working on skill. That's really best done with your private teacher. That's the reason that we have people give lessons to each other one-on-one worldwide and have for centuries. Because that's really the only way to learn an instrument really well. You got to have somebody guide you. And so learn with that. Okay, what's something else that makes the musical performance? Appearance?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think so.
like posture.
You guys are all too young. Everybody back there minus me. Have you ever seen Lawrence Welk? Anybody ever seen Lawrence Welk? Have you ever noticed how his performers look? They always look like they're having a good time. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't an accident. He told them, if you don't look like you're enjoying yourself, nobody else is going to. And, you know, granted, it's not, his music is not exactly my cup of tea all the time. But I turned over one time because that band, and Roger can tell you this for sure because he was in L.A. about that time. That was some of the best players in L.A. in that band, right? Some of the very best players. They were doing a show, and he brought somebody in, and they did big band music, Stan Kenton and stuff like that. Holy moly. I mean, they ate that stuff up. They were so glad, I think, to not be playing pop, you know, but he did. Anyway, yeah, it's important. You got to walk out on stage like you want to be there, not like you're going to the slaughter. And even if you feel like you are, you don't want to give that appearance, you know. Hey, we're all terrified to perform. Let's face it, it's hard. It's hard. All of us get nervous. The issue is not getting nervous. The issue is, what do you do about it? And how do you overcome it? Once we had Robert Nicholas Childs play at the University of Akron. These are two English euphonium players that are, each one of them would make about 4 me. Big guys. And they talked about what they did to prepare. And he said, well, I had to play the Harvard's Concerto for euphonium. Hard piece. He said, so I thought about what happens when I get nervous. He said, well, I sweat, I get out of breath. So he said, I stoked up my fire, I put on an overcoat, I ran up and down the stairs about 4 times, I got out of breath, I got sweaty, and then I tried to play it. And he said, I did that until I could play it sweaty and out of breath. So I wasn't nervous anymore, because I knew that I could control the conditions of nervousness. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've learned that. This kid that came to the lesson said, how long have you been playing? I said, oh, close to 60 years. Poor kid almost died, you know. But I've been playing a long time. I'm still going to be nervous, I can tell you right now. How it'll manifest itself, I don't know. But learning to overcome the symptoms is one way to give yourself confidence. The other thing that gives you confidence is really knowing what the heck you're doing. So that's going to happen. So you need the skill to learn the piece, and you're going to do it. What's something else that makes something musical? Yes. You know? Yeah.
Variance in articulation.
Yeah, making the articulation clear. If we can't tell if you're tonguing or slurring, or if your slurring is so rough it sounds like tonguing, then it takes away from the music. So having all the details be clear. If you listen to really great performers, you'll hear that clarity. And it doesn't matter whether they're a singer or a violinist or whatever. What makes it really good is that clarity. That's good. What else? Yes?
Expression and emotion.
Expression and emotion. And that's a tough one, isn't it? What makes it sound like that? Yeah.
Overall person.
Yeah, well, you got to put yourself into it. You know, Arnold Jacob used to say, you got to tell a story, you know. Well, that's a great thing to think about. I've even had students, I said, look, you know, write your story if you need to. I honestly, I'll be honest, when I perform, I don't think that way. I think more in terms of expressing myself with the music in front of me. But it's not a bad idea. And there were they did an experiment with pianists. And they did it with Mozart. And they had a Mozart sonata. And they said, we want you guys to play this, and we want you to play only what's on the page. And they were recording it with a very sophisticated recorder so that they could hear everything about it. Articulation, time, all of that stuff. And so the guys played it. He was a really good pianist, I mean, we're talking here. And they said, now play it the way you would. You know, if we didn't tell you just play only what's on the page. There were literally thousands of differences. Time, bringing out this note, shading this, doing that. And that's the difference. If it sounds flatline, then it doesn't. Now, the dynamics can be a big part of the expression. But yes, you're absolutely right. And you need to feel that and sense that as a person. You need to get into the piece. I used to tell students, you want to sound like that you wrote this for yourself and you believe in it. It goes back to dynamics. If you're playing dynamics and they sound like you're doing them because they're on the page, it's not going to work. They got to sound like, I believe this crescendo has to happen, because your audience has to believe that. And you need to believe it too. So yes, expression is great. And articulation, being really, really clear, that's good. Now, another thing that, how many are in college? Yeah. Study music theory, right? Why?
Understand how a piece works.
Understand how a piece works. You got it. Do you necessarily need to know that to play it, to express it?
I don't think you have to know, but it will help tremendously.
Good answer. You're absolutely right. I mean, you've heard these kids that are 4 years old, and I doubt they know any music theory, and they play, and it's like, wow, they just had it. You know, they just got it. But it really helps to know. Now, some of the things that really help is looking at a piece and figuring out what note needs to be stressed, or is there a note that needs to be stressed? Does this line need to be stressed in a certain way? Does this need to be backed off or pushed? And theory can really help you with that. You know, if you're in the key of C major and all of a sudden you start seeing G sharps, well, what's they're doing? They're moving to A minor. So just help that along a little bit, you know, can be helpful. Sometimes in jazz they call them color notes. But they're in classical music too. They're notes that just change the color of the piece you're playing. And I just gave you another hint to playing music. What?
Style.
Style? Yeah, style. And style is wrapped up in all this other stuff we're talking about, isn't it? And, you know, one of the hardest things to do in music is define all of these things. Because they're oral, for one. Two, they're fleeting. It's not like a painting where you can just sit there and look at it for a couple hours. It's there and it's gone. But style, yes. Different composers. Would you play Wagner like you play Mozart? No. Well, how do you figure that out? How do you figure out how to play Wagner versus Mozart?
You have to listen to it.
Oh, yeah. No kidding. You do a lot of listening to all kinds of music and all kinds of performers. I've had this experience in orchestra. Just rarely, occasionally, I'll have some figure that the oboe player has. And I'll play it, and I thought, I did that pretty well. And then he plays it, and I go, oh, back to the drawing board. Because for whatever reason, that instrument just lends itself to players that play with it way, you know, and singers. My goodness, you'll play a song that you know, and then you listen to a singer sing it, and it's like, oh, I see. That's a different animal. That's just completely different. So listen to all kinds of performers, all kinds of styles of music. Because it's really hard to define exactly what it is, but when you hear it, you know it. But the other thing I was getting at was I said color notes is color. We don't think about that often. We think of our sound as our sound. Yeah? But you can color it. You can make it a little darker, you can make it a little brighter, a little different if you just experiment with it a little bit. And that can add a great deal to it. I was very fortunate at the University of Akron to work with 3 other just absolutely fabulous brass players. And the horn player was a guy named Bill Hoyt. And I've heard a lot of professional woodwind quintets, but I can tell you, there is no better horn player in a quintet than Bill Hoyt. I think you guys would agree with that. It's just, and what made him so very good was how he colored his sound with whatever he was playing, bassoon or flute, whatever it was. And he'd match, and he was an incredible woodwind quintet horn player, and that was the reason. Now, you piece. Let's talk about rhythm a little bit, okay? Certainly, rhythm's got to be accurate, but often we have pieces where you see rubato or retard or whatever, okay? One of the things I'd encourage you to do, if you've got something that's rubato and you're going to change it, know it absolutely, accurately, rhythmically before you start messing with it. Otherwise, it can sound like bad rhythm. Your retards, your all the time, all those things have to sound intentional. If they don't, then it just sounds like, oh, he's just slowing down. So you need to experiment with that. And that goes back to step 1 when you're singing those kind of things. But you really need to know what the rhythm is. There's certain things that rhythm can help with creating direction. For instance, if we accelerando, that creates direction. Or slowing down. But there's also a rhythmic energy when you're playing something. Bach is a wonderful example of just having it sit there and rock. Just dead on. You know, and just sits right there. Doesn't move. There's a certain energy to that as well. So you want to know those. Okay? Just one thing. When you're listening, a lot of times you get a new piece, and or you go and you listen to a recording of it. Don't just listen to that recording and say, okay, I'm going to play it like that. Try to, if you can, listen to 3 or 4 recordings of it if you can find it. In the old days, that was hard. You know, you had to go buy records. Now you got YouTube, and you can listen to 10 different recordings if it's something well known. Because what you want to ultimately do is get some ideas from what you're listening to. I listened to Roger Bobo when I was coming up, a lot, and Harvey Phillips and those guys. But what you want to do, you've got to be your own person. You don't want to just emulate that. It will sound like that if you do. It will sound like that. You've got to digest all of that and then put it back out. So you want to listen, so you learn style, you learn things, you get ideas about how something is played, but you don't just listen to one great performance, okay, I'm going to play it exactly like that. That's not going to help your growth as a musician. You're going to grow much more if you think about how do I want to do this, okay? And we talked about it. Now, given all of this stuff, if you don't get an attractive sound in your instrument, you can still make music, but it's harder. There are some people, horn players come to mind, that I can listen to them just play on concert F and go, oh God, it's so beautiful. You know, they have it. But I've heard other sounds that weren't as great, but the musician is so good. So you want to get the best sound you can, but if you don't make music, it doesn't matter. The other thing you want to try to do in using all of this stuff is get to so that when you perform, you don't want somebody going away from your performance telling you how great a player you were. You want them to go away from the performance and think, God, I love that piece. That was such a great piece. Because then you've transcended the performance aspect of it. You've made a piece of music attractive to somebody. And that's your goal. Made it say something to somebody. You want to talk about ease of performance. How many of you have ever heard of Maurice Andre? Anybody? Well, huh?
I've heard the name.
Get to know it. He plays piccolo trumpet. And I had a roommate. I got a job in Texas, and I had this roommate. He was a trumpet player. And Maurice Andre wasn't known in this country yet. And he turned on the FM station in Dallas, and it was right in the middle of an Albinoni trumpet. It's a funky one with the clarinet. I don't know if you've ever heard it. But he has a clarinet accompaniment. But he was listening to this guy. Who is that? He was a trumpet player. Who is that? I got to know who that is. He called the station. The next day he had that recording. He went to a record store and bought it. The guy is just phenomenal. And what makes him so phenomenal is not that he plays all this stuff, but it sounds like he could do it hanging upside down being shot at, you know. Nothing seemed to affect this guy. And our trumpet teacher heard him do a master class in New York City. And he said he played every hard trumpet lick there is, and he was playing the Brandenburg and he chipped it, just chipped one. And he apologized to the audience and played it all the way through again. And at the end of it, he said, anybody got any questions? And the grand old man of trumpet at that time was Harry Glantz. He was a great trumpet player in New York. And he just said, yeah, can we shake your hand? I mean, this guy's phenomenal. So go listen to him. You ever heard of Itzhak Perlman? If you haven't, he's a violinist. He had polio, hardly walked. Comes out on the stage, he doesn't do it anymore. He hasn't wheeled him out, but he used to come out with the braces and things and sit down. And all of my years in the New Haven Symphony, we were allowed to sit on stage if there were a soloist, and we didn't play the accompaniment. I only did it once. That was when Perlman played. And I'm not a great fan of violin solos, quite honestly, but I listen to him any day. He's a super. So those are people that you want to get to know, those kinds of things. One thing back, I just one other quick story about performance. Arnold Jacobs played so effortlessly. He just, you know, he could knock the walls down and it looked like he wasn't doing anything. Well, conductors would look back at him and go, that can't be loud enough. And he's going, and he'd say, I know my hall, and he said, I knew it was loud enough. So he said, I just turned red and looked like I was struggling, and it was fine. Fool him every time. Anyway, just back to one thing, back to the rhythm thing, in that as soon as you can learn to conduct and sing yourself, better off you're going to be. I don't know why it is, but if you have rhythm problems, you're much better off conducting it and singing it than you are to try to use your foot. Your foot will go with what your bad rhythm is. If you've had rhythm problems, you know I'm telling the truth. This will not, and you can see it. One. And if you're conducting and singing, you know if the rhythm is right, because you know 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All you need to do is just those three things. So as soon as you can learn to conduct and sing, do. We talked about appearance and being confident. This is a great story. Adolph Herseth was the principal of the Chicago Symphony, and you talk about a confident player. He defined it. And when he first got in the orchestra, Fritz Reiner was a conductor, and Reiner always would try to intimidate the players. So they were doing a piece, Strauss, and it had a thump and beep. It's a high C, for trumpet, high concert C. And he kept going over that section, making Herseth do it. And finally, this is confidence, folks. This is confidence. He said, Maestro Reiner, you can send the orchestra home and we'll sit here all night because I'm not going to miss it. And he meant it. He meant it. And he wouldn't have. But you want to have that kind of confidence with it. In the phrasing thing, I talk about listening to singers. I was once in New Haven Symphony, and we had Ella Fitzgerald, a wonderful singer. Go listen to Ella Fitzgerald. And we were doing this piece, and the flute had a little intro to it. And she played it. She played it pretty nice. And Ella turned around and she said, honey, that was great, but here's kind of what I want. And we all went, I mean, it was just spectacular what she did with it. And so you want to listen to people like that. One last story in this, two of them. One I learned a long time ago that performers, particularly performers that have been doing it for a long time, have the ability to conjure up things that just weren't there until the performance. I was in a music camp, and Bill Bell was in his later years, and he was doing Tubby the Tuba with the band. And when Bill Bell did Tubby the Tuba, he did the singing, the narration, the whole thing. It was wonderful to hear. But the rehearsals, he was known to imbibe occasionally, and his jaw had gotten a very big shape. And it was just quite honestly bad. We were all like, we felt bad because he was a wonderful man. He was just a warm, wonderful person. And we were all like, wow, hate to hear that. So we were all sitting there and get to the performance that night, flat out good. I don't know if he didn't drink for that day or what he did. I don't know what he did. All I know is there the occasion was, and he nailed it. Tonight, Philip Manus and I are going to play a Mozart duet. I played this with Harvey Phillips. We had one rehearsal, and Harvey came in, and he'd been in Chicago all day long in meetings. And we played through it, and notes weren't speaking, the sound wasn't good, everything else, and I'm trying as hard as I can not to react to it. I'm playing with a great Harvey Phillips. He just put his hand on my knee like that, and he said, son, don't worry about this. He said, I haven't touched a horn all day. He said, I got nothing to do between the recital and the night. It'll be fine. And I took him at his word. Boy, was it ever. That night, it was just, So, rehearsals are important, but you need to learn what it's like to perform. And the only way you learn how to perform is to what? Do it. Take every chance you can to perform. You can practice till you're blue in the face. But get in. And it doesn't have to be a full audience. Take two friends and say, I want to play this passage for you. You don't have to make them sit there for 20 minutes and listen to the whole concerto. But just get that little tension going and learn how to do it. The more you do that, the better you're going to perform. I played with a brass quintet and we go on tour, and our first two concerts were always a little sketchier than the last 20 because, it was just new getting out there. But once we got sort of into a routine of it, you go and you hear these great brass quintets, Canadian brass quintet, Empire brass quintet, you go, wow, they're so tight, they're so good. Well, they play that program 20 times in a row under performance circumstances. once I got the chance to hear Empire have to play a new piece for the first time. It was in Akron, and a local music group commissioned the piece for them. And it was really quite fun, because they had been sitting like this playing all night. All of a sudden it was like this. And it was good, but you could tell it was a different level, you know, and when they played that piece 10 times, they were going to sound like they always did. All right, any questions about anything? Well, I think I've bored you long enough. Great talking to you. I'll see you tonight. Okay, so go write all that down, right?
All right, let's rehearse.